I'm the nut, these are the bolts. So we thought, what we'd like to do, we've got a PowerPoint. We're not going to get into the weeds of the technical development of the tool, but just show you real quickly in the PowerPoint how the basis of its development. And then for those of you who haven't seen it and most haven't, some of you have had projects reviewed by Gunnison County and have seen the results. We thought we'd just show you how we use the tool. And then if you've got questions, we can fly around the basin, we can with parcels, whatever. And if the rudder comes off, Mike will put it back on.
Okay, so we wanted to first throw it out and make sure that you guys knew that this was a tool built by the strategic committee and kind of as a group of folks that were working together. But big throw out to John Scott for helping us develop this. Mike it wouldn't have happened without Mike. Nate gave us a lot of information, both spatial and just setting this right. And the whole technical subcommittee, so Forest Service folks, BLM, Park Service. I already said John, but John was that important.
It wouldn't matter. He was chair of the technical subcommittee and, just kept supplied the information we needed then. So.
Thank you, John. Okay, so what happened is the strategic committee was talking one day and they set forth a strategic plan on how we're going to start moving forward and making sure that we're doing what's best for the ground. And the question is okay, we've got these plans, we've got these ideas, but we've got finite funds and finite time. How do we prioritize the work that we're going to be doing? And how do we make sure that we're addressing areas that need to be addressed? And so that's when they asked the technical subcommittee, can you come up with some sort of brainchild to incorporate the best science that we have to build a model, to model habitat that we could then take to a group of specialists to help us prioritize that habitat? And so that's what we did. We started looking for different sources of data and trying to figure out what can we use. We looked at nape imagery. We looked at several other different things, but finally came to the resolution that we need to start by building this model on NRCS soils data, that it was the most comprehensive that we had across the basin, that it was the most detail-oriented, and that it kind of presented that picture of the vegetation that we were going to need, that we weren't finding in anything else. So since that was so key to building this model, what I wanted to do this morning, and Jim gave me permission to, was to go ahead and just talk to you real quick about soils mapping so that you could see the strong backbone that we built this model on. So I don't know if any of you guys recognize this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so here's the top of Flat Top right here. I think Allen Lane is down here somewhere. Here's Ohio Creek running up this way. And all those white lines that you see on there are soil mapping polygons. You can see that there's some weird jagged edges. Those are differentiations between different soil mapping layers. And these soils maps were all made by soil scientists that go out into the field. How many of you are familiar with soils maps? We've seen these and used these. Okay. So that's, we don't need to go too in depth. So these soils maps, when you map them across, you can kind of see that they differentiate between different restrictive layers. They differentiate between different amounts of organic matter or any sort of thing that will change the vegetation, okay? It's mainly built for the soils, but it helps us to extrapolate to vegetation and potential vegetation. So we can use those soil mapping layers to kind of get at the different classes of vegetation. Now, soils mapping is tied to the potential vegetation, and you can use ecological site descriptions to kind of move between those different, not everything's at its potential, right? Some things are slightly degraded, some things may have been seeded to something else and may be in a different state, but it will give us a good idea of the potential vegetation that's out there. So using that potential vegetation, we could kind of figure out more about the sage-grouse habitat and map that a little bit better. So here's a picture of some shallow soils versus some deep soils. versus some in between, okay? So I'm gonna let Jim kind of talk about, we brought back in this team of specialists to help us rank these different.
Well, let's just say that we tried to summarize the documentation behind the tool, and big hands get you lots of places, but not with a laptop. So anyway, the tool is scored. The base layers, soil based. The only layer that is bird based is the lek habitat, or lek layer, lek polygons. So each layer is assigned a score, or depending on where it falls within soils, slope, and aspect, a series of scores. Leks are scored based upon whether they're active, unknown, inactive, or historic. We also scored, assigned scores to nesting habitat, close to rearing habitat, nesting habitat farther away. And in this version, scored irrigated lands outside of the 50-meter sagebrush interface with a negative score. So, and we overlaid non-habitat onto the polygon so you can see it, but it's not scored. Then we assigned negative scores to, I don't like the word, but let's call them threats, power lines, roads, housing locations, parcels less than 70 acres. And so what that comes up with is a series of scored polygons. Now this, you've seen this before, you saw it on Wednesday. The habitat prioritization tool is not bird-based. This is just a real simple validation done by CPW on the overall scored habitat. Score is fairly high, 80% of the locations were in Tier 1 habitat. So, what are we using the tool for? Gunnison County, we use it for our land use permits, our reclamation permits. It, in its tiered form, is the basis for the Gunnison Basin Candidate Conservation Agreement. We've used it to help prioritize properties, private lands for conservation easements. We've used it for project prioritization. If you've got tier 2 habitat and it's in an area where it'd be really valuable if it were restored or improved to Tier 1, it's useful. If when you go out on the ground, you see Tier 1 habitat, or model Tier 1 habitat that's not, that's maybe a project area. So also, we use it regularly to locate roads, power lines, and we found it very useful to work with our landowners. People understand maps, they like maps, they like graphics. If you can show them their property and where the modeled habitat is, it really makes the conversation much more valuable, much more useful for us and for them. So, seen this a couple of times. This is what Tier 1 habitat is overall habitat, scores 15 or more. It's about 58% of the basin across all land ownership types across 2 counties. So, you know, a caution, like most models, you start with the model, don't end with the model. You've got to go out. You've got to see what's there. You have to go out in the field. I use the model essentially daily in my work with the county, and it's a great place to start, but it is not the end of the conversation. It is not the end of the evaluation. So, and I think that holds true with most, if not all, models. So this is going to talk a little bit, and I think Mike, we are working on version 2, and so we've got some really neat things that Mike's coming up with in some updated soils.
Sure. So we are working on improving what we have. We've learned a lot from doing version 1. We've also gotten a lot more spatial data. We've also gotten a lot more updates to just like CPW, occupied habitat layers, or let counts and all that stuff. So one of the things that we're currently working on is using some sort of combination of NDVI and texture to help us better inform some of the soil layers, so that maybe we can have a better prediction of exactly how the habitat looks, and not just that potential habitat, and we'll maybe know where things are a little bit better. Yeah.
One of the things that we're working on that I think is pretty interesting is we have 1-foot pixels throughout the basin. That was a project with the Forest Service and BLM and NRCS and the county and the Park Service, that's right. Anyway, so it has one infrared band, so total to 4-band image. And it's difficult to pull all the vegetation classes out, but we don't need all the vegetation classes. We just need trees, grass, thicker sage, and less thick sage, essentially. And I think we've found a way to do that. And the problem is it's a massive data set to crunch through. So anyway, that's kind of exciting, and I think will help provide a little finer detail for the next round.
Don't go too far. So one of the other things that the Nature Conservancy and the Climate Control Working Group, they were able to come up with a system for looking at varied length or varied width stream channels too, to help us better assess brood rearing habitat. So instead of just using streamlines that we knew and buffering them with a known width, that there's a cost analysis that Teresa with the Nature Conservancy has been amazing in helping us figure out how we can build that out and actually just get the floodplain directly adjacent to those streams. So instead of having just 50 meters or whatever directly adjacent, that we can bring it out and bring it back in and to actually reflect the brood rearing habitat that's there. So we're incorporating that. And just all the updates to the data, the let counts, the updated polygon layers, new road layers, anything like that that's just a little bit old from when we initially built the tool. We're trying to incorporate all new information. And I think Jim wants to make a plug for all the modelers that are here.
Well, I mean, one thing about conferences, they bring people together, and it's obvious that there's a huge amount of brain power, a huge amount of knowledge and expertise in modeling now, and we've heard about 3, 4 models, 5 of this one probably. I'm going to pitch that we get everybody together and we figure out how to best use those models. I mean, all models have a use, and they have uses that they shouldn't be used for. So we've had some conversations here at the conference. I think some conversations started prior, but really, let's bring everybody together in the modeling world and figure out how, I mean, there may not be a way to bring them all together, but how to pick the best pieces out of it. Because this little model, I know, having used it now since 2012, is extremely useful. It's also simple. If I can run it, anybody can run it. I guarantee you that. So, I fall back on the mechanic back here when it breaks, but, so anyway, that's the pitch. Let's take a look actually at the habitat prioritization tool. My version of it is limited to Gunnison County. The tool actually extends it. It includes the whole Gunnison Basin, but from a regulatory perspective, my job is with private lands in Gunnison County. So we'll see how this works. Mike thinks I'm being optimistic, but I think it'll work. So we're going to go out and look at our ranch. We know there's sage-grouse there, we know there's sage-grouse habitat, and give you an idea of how this works.
Jonathan or Pat, could you turn the lights down a little and so that he can zoom in and see the polygons a little better? Thanks.
Okay. This is the Gunnison County parcel layer, so first thing that happens, pulls up parcel information, tells you how large the parcel is, some information from the assessor, and highlights the parcel. We'll get rid of things here real quick. But our place is southwest of Gunnison, west of Highway 149. And I'll back out a little bit here, but there's riparian area, hay meadows that run through the property here. There's some pinyon juniper. I wouldn't say it's encroaching pinyon juniper, it just grows up in the rocks. Here, nesting habitat, winter habitat, a lot of brood rearing habitat on the property. So, first thing, let's look at what it looks like just from a tiered habitat perspective. Where's tier 1 and tier 2? Okay. Do the things here. Okay, models. And one of the issues with this version of the habitat prioritization tool is modeling of riparian area. That's where work with TNC, developing techniques, we hope to make it better. The soils mapping was never really intended to get down to this resolution. But you can see our house here. There's a buffer around that, approximately, it's 300 foot in length. That's our estimated influence of a single house. So our driveway, essentially our driveway, right, is a narrow residential driveway, call it a two-track if you will. So this is tier 1 habitat. A lot of tier 1 habitat on the property. There should be, from my perspective as a biologist, more in the brood rearing habitat in the riparian area here.
Jim, before you go on, could you explain why that area kind of east of, or west of the house was not habitat? Why is that different? It looks similar on the map.
Okay, the way this models, Kathy, the red is tier 1 habitat. Everything that is not red is tier 2. So it's not that it's not habitat. It is simply habitat that the model says scores less than 15. I'll show you a scored version here. And this is opaque, so it gets a little hard to follow. This is the yellow lines around it. So now we can start playing a bit. And he said 5 minutes, I'm going to ignore him. He took 10 minutes of my time. So, I'm a landowner, maybe I want to put a house over here. I'm thinking about it. So, let's see what numerically is habitat score. You can see that's not tier 1 habitat. But down here, we're showing this is in a riparian area. Much higher scoring habitat. Scores generally go from -30s to +40s in range for overall habitat. So you can look around. I mean, what do you do? This is obviously working at the parcel level, project level. It is not in, I mean, that's where we work. I can talk landscape all day about when it comes to working with a landowner. I have to talk to them about their property. John?
Can you zoom in right on your house?
Sure.
Just a little area around it so they can see that a little tighter? And then just, you might explain too, this is available to everyone. This is the county's interactive website and mapping, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. The version I'm using, because it has echolocation, then is not available to the public. But there is a version on our interactive website that has all parcel information, road information, and the tiered version of this. So you can see what you want to look. John wants to look at his property. He can see where the tier 1, tier 2 habitat is. Oops, we don't want to do that. Stupid computer.
Probably, Kathy, you know, one of the things you talked about is why was that green and not tier 1? I think the soil mapping unit just below Jim's house to the west and south is actually stony or rocky outcrop. It's very shallow soils, and so it didn't really have the potential for sagebrush, and so that's why that scores differently.
Thanks.
I mean, it's pretty close. Nate, Seward, I mean, we've been out on probably 100 more on sites, and we take this with us. We take a printed version, and often it's, whoa, I mean, how precise it really is, considering how the lack of precision or the resolution of the soil mapping. It is really helpful. So anyway, without getting too far into the weeds and trying to keep Pat on schedule here, let's look at one more non-habitat. We'll just go to a site that again, come on.
Well, Jim Stewart, could I ask a question to everybody? I know you guys wanted to, or the 11 county group wanted to start doing this in other populations. Is there potential for funding from the Fish and Wildlife Service or anybody's groups? Anyone have an idea on how we would fund that for the other populations?
There's section 6 funding that the
Dave?
state can apply for.
Is-
Might be
Yep. While Mike's fixing the weather here, the county coalition committed to exporting this tool or what we come up with. I mean, it doesn't have to, we don't have pride of ownership with the best information we can for the county. We did start in the Crawford population for a number of reasons. One, it's close to us. Two, it's a relatively small occupied habitat polygon. And honestly got derailed with the listing and all of that that's gone with it. But the intent still is to be able or try to make this available to people on the ground. You know, we've been told in the satellite population all habitat is important, but there are reasons why. One of them is public-private land, where this would be valuable to you. It isn't, you know, it has its use. But anyway, this is an area of non-habitat. This is the Gunnison River, cottonwoods, willow, alder. But you can see the tool still scores it. There's habitat here, and as you back out, you can start seeing along the hay meadows to the west, the tier 1 habitat showing up. So anyway, I think we're pretty close. I'd like to, I mean, if you've got any questions, certainly the experts are here. I'm an expert at using the tool and not building it. But that's the habitat for our organization. Andrew?
Yes, quick question. In the depiction around your house, tier 1 habitat came up as kind of pinkish, but then when you brought in a score for the riparian area, it scored 28. My understanding was that tier 1 scored 15 or above. Why didn't that riparian show up as tier 1?
Tier 1, the higher scores show up where there's overlap of habitats. And in that case, there was a sliver down in the riparian area. And we know that more of that riparian area is actually Tier 1 than is modeled right now. That's one of the areas we are working on right now to make it better with that issue.
So it's not strictly a score-based depiction, there are other factors that come in?
Well, it is score-based when you're trying to use it. I mean, you want to see, well, Jim wants to build a house, and that's important habitat, it looks like. But it doesn't model, I mean, only a sliver models as having a high score. We know better than that. So we can work with the landowner.
So I think I know exactly what you were looking at too, and there is kind of the drainage that was removed, but the tiny slivers that included both nesting and that brood rearing habitat were included in that Tier 1. So although we should have switched back to it, that's a really good point. But it was included as Tier 1 habitat where it was red and that orange color, but it was the bottom, the yellow, that was kind of taken out.
Andrew had a question behind her.
Yeah. So I think you said like this covers Saguache County as well, this tool.
It does.
And so I didn't see them as like a participants or authors. I'm just kind of wondering if they're using this for zoning as well.
They are not right. They are not right now. You know, their land use process is far behind ours. We're trying to help them. We do help them. And so when they have building permit application in Saguache County is only about 8 miles south of us here. So they come to us and we work through it with them. We help them. But their land use code is I won't call it sophisticated, but they do not have Gunnison Sage-Grouse specific land use regulations. But yes, we do work with them in Saguache County.
Probably moving on.
All right, let's get